Okay, welcome back. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to establish our fillets to hook into our mainline edge of pavement. Now, in this particular case, it's not really necessary to make a construction reference here. We are going to actually pick this line as one of our terminations for our fillet, but because this is going to get absorbed by the main edge, then we know we have that replacement line there. The reason that we can't do that here is because this white line needs to be set up as a break line in our pavement terrain, and so it's critical that we have that extra line in there and everything then be built off of that, but we don't really need that on the fillet, and so it should make a little bit more sense here in a little bit. So to do that, we simply come into our horizontal geometry, and I'm going to use the simple arc command for this exercise, and we're going to tell it, you can give it a feature definition. Road edge of pavement is fine. You can give this a name if you wish, so I'll just call this I'll just make something up here, arc 1, and follow the prompts. So you locate your first edge. Just make sure you're consistent. So we'll locate our first edge, which will be the side road edge, and then we're going to locate this placement reference up here, and then we put in a radius value. Let's say that we use a value of 35, and then when we go through the prompts here, we only want to trim back, and so when we get to that one, use your down arrow. We don't want to trim the placement reference because that would have set a rule, and we don't want to do that. So we trim back, and that trims the piece of the edge of pavement, and then we'll do the same thing on the other side. So we locate our first reference. Again, be consistent. Don't pick the side road or the main through edge first and then the side road edge. We're going to pick the side road edge first again, then we'll pick the main line, and then we will accept a radius value and trim back, and then we'll F4 to come out of the command. And so that essentially trims horizontally, and we need to then set a profile. And so we'll come to our vertical geometry, and we have a tool specifically for this called the Quick Profile Transition tool in our vertical geometry. And so we'll select that. And we have the option here for parabolic, linear. I'm going to do a reverse parabolic profile, so we'll accept that. And then essentially you just touch each of your arcs. And so I'll pick our first arc, and you'll see immediately our model on the right updates, and then we'll pick parabolic again and select our second arc, and now we can F4 or escape to come out of our command. And you can see our model then took that on. And it's always a good thing to test. I've added new geometry. I've got the profile set. So if I come over here and move this around, I should see all of that update. If I move my through road edge, doesn't matter which end I pick here, I should see all of that update. And so everything looks like it's working perfectly. Extensions should not matter here because we've locked in our length here of 200. And I'm just going to go ahead and bump that down a little bit. Let's change it to 150. And you can see everything's working well. I come in and test my radius. If I change this to 50, does that work? Yes, I got a new trim, so that's working fine as well. So everything looks very good on adding in those arcs. Now, at this point, we have created essentially the boundary of what we would want to consider for a thickness of pavement, with one exception. Excuse me. We also have to have what we call a seam line that would maintain the integrity of the pavement terrain. So we have the edges of pavement, we have our break line that represents our baseline, but we need a line now that will become part of the terrain model and hold as geometry is manipulated, that basically is going to tie to the endpoints of these arcs, and the vertical is going to be set off of our main line edge of pavement. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce this seam line that is going to represent our boundary for our terrain. So I'm going to go pick a feature for that, and I believe I'm going to have to look around for this. I think I used match line in the examples workspace, and we'll have something equivalent in the MoDOT workspace. So we need to horizontally place this first, and we're going to go back to that very same command that we did for the side road baseline where we did the single offset partial. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to offset the through road edge of pavement. So it says to locate the element that we essentially want to offset, and I'm just going to turn off my lock length here, and we're going to pick this line. Now the first thing that it asks us for, I don't really care too much about the offset. We can lock that in if we want to. And notice that the start distance is a station, and I told you never to use stations. Well, essentially we're not going to use station because we're going to actually allow it to snap to the end of our arc. That is a very important concept. So we're going to snap, and the way that you snap when you're making civil cells is you have to have AccuSnap turned on, and then you give it time to find it. Once it finds it, then don't do a tentative. You just accept it. Okay? And I know I'm being crazy here, but it is that picky. Now we want to, again, if you toggle over to length or in distance, never use in distance station. Toggle to length, but it's not going to matter because essentially we're going to override length and allow it then to snap to this endpoint. So once it finds it and highlights it, then, and you have to kind of be careful with your mouse, accept. Okay, we don't want to mirror, and now we're done. Okay, so we'll come out of our command. Now we want to profile this thing. Well, it'd be a lot easier if I didn't have this thing sitting on top of itself. So I'm going to come in and select it, and in here is an offset. I think there should be an offset. Did I pick the right command? Let's see. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so if I go, let's put in a value here of 5. Okay, so now it doesn't matter left or right, but I just wanted to get it off of that line. So now we need to profile this line. It's going to be the same exercise once again. So we're going to do a profile by slope from element, and we're going to locate the element that we want to profile is here. Now we're going to reset, and we're going to locate our reference element, and this is going to be 0. So I type 0, enter, accept. I had to do 3 things for it to pick that. Okay, accept, 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 and now you'll see it in my model. It's profiled. Okay, come out of the command, and at this point I'm going to come in and set my offset back to 0. Okay, and notice how it shows those key point snaps are still there. If I go in and I select this, my intersection snap still there. Okay, now I should be able to test this and make sure I can't break it horizontally or vertically. Okay, horizontally or vertically. Now, what I see sometimes with users is they'll make their reference lines too short, and when they go to test it, they'll run out of profile. And you may still, for whatever reason, they might have a placement reference line that is 1,000 feet long, but they only put a profile on it of 100 feet. And so they get to a certain point and things will start failing, and they couldn't understand why. That's why having your model open all the time is really important, because you need to see, have I moved off of where I have profile information? Okay, and so that's really critical. Okay, and I've seen some people that they would make their mock terrain model, like an elevation of 2. Well, it's kind of hard to distinguish 2 from 0. And on this particular seed file, it was meant to be 1,000 meters, which that's why it came up to like some odd 300 and something. But in your seed file, I would just suggest making like the, make all your lines set to like 1,000 or something like that. Okay. So make your train model, like 1,000, and then maybe make your geometry, put it all up in the air a little bit, like 1,003 or something like that, just so you can see some relief. Yeah. Okay, so that that kind of concludes making the perimeter, okay, and you can see all of that's working well. The next step in the process is to make a terrain model out of our perimeter, okay? Why do we do that? Well, our pavement has a structure. It has a depth, right? Well, we need to show that depth. When we place that civil cell, we want it to see the characteristics of what's inside there. And so we make a terrain model, and then to the terrain model we assign a template, just our regular roadway templates. And what it does is it finds the insertion point or the origin of the template and looks straight down and evaluates what it sees and what are its thicknesses. So it doesn't really matter what template I pick. It could be a curb and gutter. It just says, well, under the template origin, I see these particular layers, and this is how thick they are. And that's what it puts in there. And it basically parallels that top terrain. Well, the first thing we do is we have to create the terrain. Okay? And so to create the terrain, we just come over to Task. We come over to Terrain Model. And there's an icon in here that says it's the fifth icon, Create from Elements. Create from Elements. And so I'm going to select that command. Okay. Now, right now I have something in a selection set. So I'm going to reset. You want to come in here not having a selection. That was my bad. So I'll come back into the command again. Create from Elements. Okay. And it says to locate what element to add. Well, we want what? The seam line. Make sure you get the seam line and not this. Okay, that one is, you see the line name there, DNC 18. We don't want that one. We want this one. So I'm going to reset one time and then accept. Now, if I would have left that as an offset of 5, I could have easily picked it. So we want that one, right? We want this one. We want that one. And we want that one. And we want that one. Don't do the brake line yet. Okay, we want to make the train and then we want to add that to the train. Okay, so we want to reset. Now it says, what are these? Well, these are, I'm arrowing down, boundaries. Okay. And you can obviously set a feature definition here. So like if I go to train display and pick, I'm just going to say, I want you to see the contours. So I'm going to say, or the triangles. I'm going to pick existing triangles. I want you to see them. So it's a boundary, and you can, remove slivers, maximum triangle length. I'm just going to do slivers here. And now we have, and I've got, the model is turned off as a reference in 2D, which is kind of nice. But I want you to see the triangles. Okay, so far so good, right? So I'm going to come out of my command with F4. Now, again, test this thing. Can I break this? And so if I come over here and I do this, does my terrain always heal? And it looks good, right? So the next thing we want to do is I want to insert this as a brake line. Okay? I'm going to insert that as a brake line. And so I'll come over here to my terrain model, and in the terrain model there's a command here that says add features. Add features to the terrain. And so that's the second row, the second icon. So we'll select that command, and the first thing it says is to locate the terrain. Well, I don't have that reference turned on, but I can still come over here to my 3D view and pick it if I want. So I'll just make that active, and I'll select it. Okay? Actually, hang on a minute. Let me start that again. I think I hit reset. Add features, and it's not going to let me pick it there. So we'll select the terrain model. Now I can come back over here. It says locate the element to add. And so I just hover over it, look at what it tells me I'm picking. Right? And accept it. Now it says, do you want to add any more? No. Okay, we'll reset. you're going to have to make yourself read every word on these prompts. That is going to be your biggest mistake you make at the beginning. Just trust me. So now we're going to, that's a break line, so we'll accept it, right? And now you can see those triangles got picked up. Okay, now, one step that I missed that you should probably do before you make the terrain model is every entity that you know becomes part of that terrain model, verify in the quick properties, which is the first one, that you are happy with your linear stroking distances and your curve and profile stroking distances. These are populated from your workspace initially, but you can overwrite them. Okay, every 10 feet is probably too loose following an edge of pavement, for example, right? So when I change that, okay, it's going to update the terrain model. And so now these distances along this line here, the maximum they could be is 5 feet. Okay, so let me go into that one more time. So we'll select it, we'll go to quick properties, and I'm just going to change this to a really small number just so you can see it. See the difference? So there's 5, and the default here was 10. And so we want to say, for example, typically I think every 5 feet is about, on a civil cell, is pretty good. So I'm going to go around to each of these others, and I'm going to make that change. And so I'll come into my arcs, and the arcs don't matter, right? Because there's no linear stroking along an arc. But on my tangents, okay, if I come in and select those, now remember these are referenced off of this, right? So I would select this one and come in and change it here to 5, and it updates it exactly. All right, but remember why I couldn't set it here? Well, because it's a child of this, so whatever this is, that is. Okay, so we got that one set, and then now the other thing is, do I want my arcs to be, chorded like this? So I can smooth those out, right? So I come into each arc and I say, what is the, curve stroking? Well, let's say that I change that to like 0.01, and then you could even do that on the profile as well, and that'll tighten it up. And then we can come over here and we'll come back to this one, 0.01 and 0.01, and then that'll just make these that much more smooth or accurate. Now the problem is it also requires more processing horsepower. So yes, I could set this to every inch, and I could set these to 0.000001, but I have just made a monster terrain that I got to process every time I clip the corridor. Okay, so just use common sense. Now, one of the things that we'll learn when we go back and look at the civil cell presentation and kind of highlight some of these points, it'll say to make sure that you're consistent with all of your settings along all of your edges, because what will happen is if you introduce inconsistencies, then it can become a problem. Now on this one I only changed the linear, okay, but think about that. What if I'm in real geometry? What if, remember, this is taking on the real edge of pavement. What if that's going through a spiral or a taper and it's not a straight line? Well, then I should really be consistent here, right? And set those the same as what I'm doing for the rest of the boundary of that terrain. Okay? And so I'm going to set that back to 5. But if I say 0.01, 0.01, and 5, then make it that way all the way around. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so if I come in here, whatever you decide it needs to be consistent all the way around. Okay, and so here we have 0.01, 0.01, and 5. Not that 5 is going to do anything on an arc, but just as a training exercise, make them all the same. Okay, so there's that one, and then we're going to get this middle one is 0.01, 0.01, and 5. Now the other one that you have is this stroking step method. You can do increment or you can do even distance. Okay, and so it just kind of gives you a little bit of a difference in the way the triangles are done. I've always found the increment works just fine, and it looks at the increment that you have set. Okay, I think that is it for what we wanted to show in terms of building the terrain model. And so again, if I come in and test this, and even if I place it, everything should be fine. Now, I have had situations on some civil cells where we would get bleeding where these come together. And what I have seen users do sometimes is go into the properties of that particular one, and I think you have to go into the full element information properties. But in the, I think it's the, is it the head taper? No, or the head, one of these has a offset that you can change. This is it. And I'm going to put in something here really big, okay? But see what that does? It still thinks it's closed, but what I have seen people do sometimes, if they get a bleed right here, they'll change that to like 0.01. You can't see it, but it makes the terrain fix itself. Okay? And so just keep that in the back of your mind if you ever see that happening. But if you construct it the way that I did, and this match line is snapped, okay, to that end of that fillet, it shouldn't ever leak. The triangle should never leak, okay? So we got our break line in, we got all of our terrain done. The next thing we do now is we apply the surface template to the terrain. Okay. Now I could come into my 2D design file and I can go here and I can turn on, display, snap and locate if I want to. But it just makes the 2D a lot harder to work with. And this is typically why in the seed file we turn off display, and we also turn off that we can't snap to it. Now if I do a fit view, I still want to be able to find it. But that's kind of why we do that. I think it's pretty obvious. So what I can do here is, this next command is very simple. I can literally just go over to my 3D view, and I can just come onto my triangles and select the terrain. And one of the commands here is to place a surface template. And all we're doing is paralleling that top edge with whatever thing we pick. So I'm going to go pick that, and then it's asked me to apply an external clip boundary. No, I don't have a clip boundary. We're just going to use those edges. So I'll select no, and then it says to pick your template. So I'm going to do Alt down, go back to my normal template library. Okay? And so you would go pick some pavement structure, and I've got one in here in the examples workspace. I think I've kind of hidden it a little bit, but it's under, it's underneath, where did I put that? Actually, I'm in the MoDOT template library right now because that's the last one I opened. And that's okay. It doesn't really matter. Let's just say that we want to do a asphalt pavement structure. I don't want to do, now I'm not going to have your features, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel out of here for just a minute, and I'm going to go open my template library that goes with this workspace. So bear with me just a minute. Okay, now we're good. Alright, so now when I come back into that command again, so we'll pick our terrain with this in this active drawing. I'm just going to pick on top of the triangles. And by the way, just before we get to that, if you ever wanted to see different views here, I can just pick this terrain and go to my quick properties, and you're going to have under this feature definition here, I can pick anything I want to. Let's say I wanted to see what the contours look like. They're supposed to show up. Why didn't they? It's too flat for that setting, that's why. Okay. So pick the terrain again. And I was hoping to show you something, but unfortunately it's so flat that the contour settings are not going to pick it up. So anyway, I'll go back to existing triangles. Okay. We probably need to consider that though when we're looking at terrain displays, is we have a couple different options, because I think if we're like at 10 and 5 and you don't have that much relief on, as you see, you're not going to see. So we might need another entry that has a much tighter interval of contours. Okay, so anyway, back to what we're doing. So we're going to apply that surface template. So I'm going to select the terrain, and I'm going to go to Apply Surface Template, and we'll go into Alt Down again, and now we're going to go into the template library I selected last, and underneath here I've got just a little combo pavement structure set up with some concrete on ag base. So I select OK to that, and just accept it, and then accept again. And now if we go, for example, to our illustration mode here, and we come in, notice how we've got the depth of material set. Okay. So now we have, I don't know if you kind of see that green there, that's because of the triangles, so we kind of got like material and triangles on top of each other. So I could, at any time, I can come back to this, right click and grab the terrain, which is there, and I can change this, for example, to existing boundary, okay, and then that bleeding will go away. Okay. Now, one thing to point out, you're still going to see the mesh edges, and that's got to do with that. We picked that illustration, that illustration with lighting. And I just learned this the other day, but if you go to like your display styles, and we were using that illustration, ignore lighting, there is these visible edges. And see, if I turn that off, it makes them go away. So you think they're the triangles, but really it's just a representation of the mesh, and that's what that's for. And so if you wanted to do something like that, but see, we also have, we have the smooth option, so there's different ways. Illustration has those turned on, but if I go down here to like transparent, that gives you a little different look. Smooth, so, smooth takes away those lines, and so it just depends on what it is you pick, and how those display settings are set up. And so those will just be things that you'll fine tune as you go along. Okay, let's go ahead and crank the lighting up a little bit. So that's smooth shading right there, and those edges of those meshes are off now. Okay, so that essentially is the application, or the creation of the terrain model, and also the application of the surface template. And so we're going to break the video here, and then what we're going to do is we're going to come back in our next exercise, and we're going to apply linear templates along the edges to complete our tie down to our terrain model.